everyone. We are so happy for you to join us again during this lunchtime program with the Maryland Historical Society. I am one of your hosts, Margot Copera, Museum's Public Programs Manager. And this is my partner, Martha Oster-Beal, Community Engagement Manager at the Historical Society.
Hi, everyone. We are expecting to have a very colorful program here today with your audience interaction. So we really want to encourage you to engage with us during the program by using the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and by asking questions for both our guests and for us at any time during the program using the Q&A icon, also located at the bottom of your screen. In case you're new to MDHS virtual programs, we wanted to let you know that this program is being recorded, so your audio and video capabilities have been removed.
So, as you may all know, the Maryland Historical Society holds a vast collection of clothing that spans 4 centuries through our fashion archive, the largest and most comprehensive fashion archive in the state and ranking paramount in the nation. To quote one of our guests today, Alexandra Deutsch, she says, "The Maryland Historical Society's costume collection is, in every sense of the word, encyclopedic." I can personally attest to that all who work at the Maryland Historical Society, we are all so proud to be on the forefront of such a vibrant and dynamic field of study.
In October of last year, we asked our Baltimore and Maryland community to help us celebrate this collection and opening of our exhibition Spectrum of Fashion with an amazing gala and fashion show. We called on Maryland designers, boutiques, and vintage dealers to participate, hoping to bridge the fashion of the past with the present, and of course, to inspire contemporary design. And wow, has the fashion landscape really changed or what? To further highlight contemporary Maryland designers whose work is elevating Maryland in the world of fashion, right before the pandemic hit, we installed a rotating installation in our lobby called Spotlight on Maryland Design. We were highlighting the first Maryland designer on view was Baltimore-born Bishmi Kumbardi, whose creations have served as love letters to his hometown. This showcase served as our love letter to Bishmi for the positive impact he's brought to the Baltimore community.
So we are joined today by 2 people who celebrated with us at the Spectrum of Fashion Gala and fashion show last year. Both of them have elevated Baltimore creatives then and now. Through this, they have formed their own hypothetical love letters to Baltimore. Alexandra Deutsch is a fashion historian and avid vintage collector. During quarantine, she created the social media campaign #LoveLetterBaltimoreVintage, where she is helping to connect people through clothing, specifically what they're wearing during quarantine. We're also joined this afternoon by Cara Ober, founding editor and publisher of Bmore Art. Cara has added to the movement by highlighting Baltimore's quarantine style through the magazine series What They're Wearing. She is also a lover of vintage clothing and can trace her infatuation back to the $1 all-you-can-grab bags at Goodwill she was. Welcome to the Maryland Historical Society's virtual program stage, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Alexandra and Cara, Margot and I really tried our best today to show you what we may not typically wear during our work from home situations. I'm wearing a very colorful mini dress that has polka dots and tigers on it. I purchased it at Double Dutch Boutique down on the Avenue a while ago. And Margot, what are you wearing today?
The only vintage I have is my mother's vintage, late 1960s, probably Hochul Cone or Hutzler's department store purchase. So that's what I'm wearing. And we normally, I think I can speak for Martha too, like we normally do not present ourselves this way on a day-to-day basis if we're not in front of the camera. So it's a treat to be able to pull out some of our old work clothes, put some makeup on, and doll ourselves up a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, Cara and Alexandra, since the two of you are going to be talking a lot about hashtag quarantine fashion, I thought I'd start the program by asking the audience where they have been following hashtag quarantine fashion. So a poll has popped up on everyone's screen. We're going to be launching a few of these throughout the program while Alexandra and Cara are talking, and we hope you like them. Without further ado, I am going to, while you all are polling, I'm going to put up our presentation today, and then I will turn it over to our lovely guests. And it's interesting to see the poll results coming in. I'm going to end the poll and share them with everybody.
Very interesting.
All right.
Looks like Instagram had it, right? Was the winner, right, Martha?
Yep, by far, I'd say.
Are you surprised, Alexandra or Cara?
I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not a Pinterest fan, but Instagram is pretty good.
I'm a little surprised that TikTok isn't a big report, but I can tell you, following TikTok, that you're not seeing as much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alexandra, I'm going to turn it over to you. Margot and I are going to hide our videos, and we're thrilled to have the two of you today, and excited to learn more about this phenomenon.
Great. So I think we can go to the first slide.
Okay.
Thank you. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the title of the talk. And I'm really delighted that all of the time that I spent on my screen, which was pretty shocking during closure, has actually yielded a talk. I never really expected that. But I want to explain and really the two aspects of this talk. The first being the whole phenomena of quarantine fashion. And so what you're looking at here are just 3 examples of posts. And you can see it's a huge range of people all over the world, all different style perspectives, who were engaging in documenting their quarantine looks. I also want to note that this talk was originally scheduled to happen at the end of May and was delayed because of the crises in our country surrounding issues of race. And I'm very glad the talk was delayed. When I went back to the talk, I also realized that quarantine fashion and the hashtag, as most things are in social media, is now on the wane because so many places are reopening to one degree or another. Interestingly, you definitely can see, if you track these hashtags associated with quarantine fashion, where places are more open versus less open. So I don't want to say that this phenomena has entirely ended, but it is definitely on the wane. So it just shows you in the world of social media how quickly things can change. So my interest in quarantine fashion now is looking at it from an almost a historical perspective. And by exploring it through sites like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter, you can actually sort of trace the ebbs and flows. You can see when it starts, you can see as it's trickling off. And I love the historiography now of this phenomena. The other component of this that I think is much more central to my heart is this theme of connectivity. So here we're looking at this range of people. I am there in my home in Baltimore, but I'm also able to look at people all over the world, and they're engaging in the same thing that I am. They're staying home and they're documenting what they're wearing. It's the next slide. I was dressing up every day of quarantine, and I'll talk a little bit about my perspective on why I was dressing up. But here I am. Actually, this was on Mother's Day, and my daughter took this photo of me because I, that morning, was thinking about all the posts I had done, thinking about how many times I had tagged Baltimore sellers, or some sellers who were outside of Baltimore but very connected into the Baltimore vintage community. And I had done that very intentionally because many of these sellers were not able to get the federal relief that larger businesses were able to get. It's been a very difficult time for these sellers, whether they've been brick and mortar and shut down, or some who really relied on doing big shows and kind of festival events and didn't have a strong virtual presence. And so by tagging them, which was my initial strategy, I was trying to drive people to make people aware of them. But on that Mother's Day, it occurred to me that if I could go live with them and I could create a series of lives, and I entitled it Love Letter to Baltimore Vintage, I could maybe push more people to them. And also, instead of hearing my perspective on vintage all the time, I could give voice to these sellers who've all come to sell vintage, to be thrifters. And we're not just talking about clothing, talking about jewelry as well, and other aspects of vintage and thrift. I could give voice to them and drive more attention to them. And that was really my goal, is to support them through this difficult time. Next slide. I want to back up from the local and talk a little bit about what was going on nationally and of course internationally. So here we're looking at the Vogue cover from June, July. So I also thought it was really interesting going back to this talk because in light of the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, Vogue and in fact the entire Condé Nast industry, not industry, but Condé Nast group of publications have come under extreme criticism during this period. But what I did want to highlight is that when closure happened, Vogue pivoted, and Anna Wintour wrote something I thought very powerful about the nature of Vogue and the nature of this particular image. It was entitled A Common Thread, which was also a reference to a fundraising effort to support designers who were, without question, suffering as a result of closure. But I think it was actually, there's merit in talking about this issue. She chose, rather than putting a celebrity or a celebrity model on the cover, to draw upon the Vogue archive and to use an image by Irving Penn of a single rose. And it was a cue, and her intention was that it was a cue that it was a moment of transition. It was a moment of changing perspectives. And that it was a moment when we were going to step aside from celebrity and the famous models and the things we normally saw in Vogue. And they began depicting things like healthcare workers who were working in the pop-up hospitals that had to happen outside the main hospitals in New York, in Brooklyn, in Queens. Although there were models represented, there were celebrities represented, they were not represented in any kind of orchestrated way, but in a natural way. And it was, even though certainly Anna Wintour herself in Vogue has come under fire, it was a transitional moment, and I think in the world of the Condé Nast empire, to say things are different and things must change. The next slide. And then I want to take it to a more humorous note. and say that what I found so funny was this immediate pivot that started to happen was actually going to asking celebrities, what are you wearing in quarantine? And here's Tim Gunn of Project Runway fame. And I love his quote because I think it leads us to a debate about how people spend their time dressed in quarantine. And he says, I have a good deal of empathy for people who really subscribe to the comfort trap. It's easy to get trapped, but I do have a pact with myself. When I'm wearing pajamas and a robe, I won't even go down the hall of my apartment building to the trash chute. So he drew a line. And I guess now our poll is going to see, how did you dress when you were at home? I will say that for me, I will not say that I didn't have a time in quarantine where I was not dressed up, but very quickly I learned that dressing up made me feel better. So it looks like 43% in sweats and 57% in jeans. I also think a really hysterical thing that evolved on social media was people saying they'd been in sweats and pajamas for so long that they were finally putting their jeans back on, and so they were actually posting the first time they had worn their jeans since being in quarantine. So there were a lot of very humorous posts associated with that. Next slide. And this is just a tiny glimpse of the hashtags associated with quarantine fashion. The ones that I've highlighted in the brighter green are actually the ones that have been the most popular, or at least were the most popular when I was preparing this talk. I will say that going effing nowhere but getting dressed would rank in the top 3 of hashtags. The other one that was extremely popular but does somewhat relate to quarantine, but is ongoing, is the quarantine pillow challenge, which was people wearing nothing but a pillow, styled it up in a variety of ways. I think the other thing when you looked at these hashtags is the theme of celebrating being in quarantine, in a sense of you were doing good for others. Stay home, stay safe. One of the popular hashtags, safe and stylish. Stay at home challenge. Things that were saying this is for the good of the whole became popular hashtags. Next slide. And here are a range of posts that I did during quarantine. It's just a snapshot. I will say that one thing I've been very committed to is I really acknowledge the places that my clothes come from. And I don't do that for any other reason than I believe that celebrating this community of sellers is really central to my love of vintage. The gift of friendship and the gift of communication and education that I have gotten through thrifting and wearing vintage has come from this very broad community of sellers. So I buy pretty much anywhere, everywhere, on every platform, and I buy from around the world. In fact, since quarantine, I even bought a piece from Latvia. I buy what I love. I don't follow trends. I'm not actually particularly interested in trends other than from a historical point of view, but I've made a real commitment in my posts. It is about the sellers, and in some ways, I started Volumes of Vintage to really celebrate the sellers who brought such richness to my life. Next slide. And here are a few of the things that I did to amuse myself during depressing days of endless Zoom meetings. You see the image of me, the kind of old-fashioned styled image. This was a fantastic style challenge that was done by 2 women in England. Their handle on Instagram is Style on the Sticks. And they did a whole fantasy series of fashion challenges, and one of them was imagine you're traveling on the Orient Express. I have to say I had a ball doing it. I am wearing a 1920s, very early 20s jacket. I'm wearing an incredible Hungarian 1920s blouse. both of them sourced from local sellers. The jacket from Luna Blue Vintage, and the top was from Milk and Ice. The skirt is from Keepers Vintage. So all local. Again, the image in the middle. I have to say that when I have meetings, I dress as if I'm at the meeting. Again, another fabulous 60s suit that is from Luna Blue Vintage. And then sometimes you just have to find fun where you can. I am obsessed with Mrs. America, the show, and I just did myself up like Gloria Steinem, including put my sunglasses through my hair the way Gloria Steinem did. And so I can't tell you the joy that it brought to me. But our challenge now is for people to vote on which style period they like the best. I would say that for me, I definitely love the 70s the most. Oh, wow. 50s. It's been really interesting talking to vintage sellers because the 50s really were incredibly hot in the vintage market. And actually, we've talked a lot recently with several, I've talked a lot with sellers saying that the 50s definitely are on the wane. So the prices for 50s clothes have gone way down. So if you love the 50s, it's probably a really good time to buy. Next slide. I just wanted to give you my sense. I know that some of these quotes are long, but I just am going to highlight some aspects of it. I thought it was a good idea for me to talk about what my philosophy of dressing up in quarantine was. And I think for me, dressing up in quarantine was an effort to feel normal, to imagine I wasn't living inside my house. And that posting the outfits gave a degree of fantasy to my days. But more importantly, very quickly, it became a way to connect with other people all over the world. And when I look at the Instagram posts of others, it brings me inspiration, but it also makes me feel connected. And it brought a genuine joy to days that were not always joyful. It also gave me an opportunity to celebrate the Baltimore sellers who as I've spoken of, I really am devoted to this local community. More importantly, I just want to end my quote by saying that this is my philosophy on clothing. Fashion is fantasy. It's always a story, always something that can make you feel like the star of your own movie. And right now, being lifted out of the realities of the world is just what I need. So for me, it has actually been the mood elevator during a really, really challenging period. Next slide. I thought I'd back up and just give a very brief story about how I started really wearing vintage on a daily basis. In 2010, I was invited to a Mad Men party, and I am absolutely obsessed with Mad Men to this day and just the style of it. And I particularly think January Jones as Betty Draper is just everything. And I was invited to this Mad Men party, and I wanted to dress as close as I could to an outfit that Betty Draper had worn. This outfit is, for me, really a turning point because buying this outfit from Luna Blue Vintage was the beginning of me meeting people who wore vintage every single day. Here is my husband, who is actually my best companion in vintage, dressed up as Ringo Starr. He is always dressing up with me, and we have a ton of fun together, even though his interest is not fashion. So it goes back to really 2010 that I met a community of people who wore vintage every day and did not view vintage as a costume, did not view vintage as a novelty. I had worn vintage really to some degree all my life, but always for special occasions or not really wearing it and thinking about it as my everyday wardrobe. So 2010 was the beginning of that. Next slide. What I do with my love letters to Baltimore Vintage posts is that those days leading up to when I go live with the sellers, I actually post almost exclusively what I have bought from those sellers. So people can really see the kind of merchandise that these sellers have. And most of my wardrobe is actually composed of pieces I have acquired through Baltimore or Maryland-based sellers, although I do have many sellers who I follow throughout the world and have bought from. So here are just 3 examples the purple from Get Shredded, the outfit in the middle actually from Milk and Ice, bought at the Baltimore Vintage Expo, and then the gold all sourced from Luna Blue Vintage, who I keep talking about. Also, even my jewelry is purchased from Baltimore sellers, most often purchased from Bijou Jewels or Parisian Flea. I really feel deeply committed that supporting my local sellers is something that's a very important part of how I dress, and I feel like it's a commitment to the local community. Next slide. These are just examples of my lives. They are very informal. I never thought I would ever go live on Instagram, but really the focus of these lives is not to hear my perspectives necessarily on vintage, but to hear the stories of these sellers. You're looking at Sarah from Get Shredded. She is a seller who's now just opening a new shop in Remington. Prior to that, she was in Charles Village. She's also been making extraordinary masks, which if you watch the presentation by Vicky Pass about quarantine, what was being worn in quarantine historically, Sarah is making these incredible fringed masks, which are still being sold. In the middle, I was talking with Welsh Bohemian, who is actually based closer to Ellicott City, but is a major seller at Baltimore events and has a very unique bohemian style and is also an artist. And then the other slide is what you're seeing is a glimpse of the closet and this vast vintage collection that's been assembled by Andrea of Love Me Two Times in Roland Park. And here's our next question. How much of your wardrobe is vintage used recycled clothing? And I would say that every year I get closer and closer, except for my shoes, to being at right now, I'd say I'm about at 95% personally. But I've been at it a long time, and I think my commitment has just grown stronger, and I think the sustainability piece has grown more and more significant for me. I love to see that there's people out there at 80%. Next slide. One of the first things, and this is where it goes over to Cara, one of the first things that happened that I thought was so great in quarantine was the Bmore Art quarantine style initiative. The stories of the people represented in this initiative were just simply fabulous. I am so glad that I jumped on it and was able to be a part of it. And, to me, it's not only what the people are wearing, but it shared their philosophies and it shared their insights into the pandemic. It shared their insights into the moment we are in the world. So the story is just so much bigger than the clothes. And I think that that's something that is really powerful to me. We know that fashion is social history, and this is social history. It really needs to be elevated in everyone's mind, because in the end, clothes are about people. And this particular feature to me was about people. And it really transcended the nature of what they were wearing, but it was what they were wearing and how that expressed themselves that was what was powerful in this project, particularly to me. Next slide. Baltimore Snap and Sloan Brown have been working on a quarantine initiative, and this is the amazing Lisa Simeone, who some of you watching may know. Her neighborhood in Charles Village actually did a prom night. It was entirely socially distant, and here she is in just her extraordinary outfit that she wore for prom night in Charles Village. So talk about someone who has just completely taken it to a whole new level in quarantine. That is Lisa Simeone. And Lisa, I asked for a quote from this. Lisa has very strong opinions that definitely would make one question anyone who thinks fashion is superficial. And she says, so many people think fashion is superficial. In my opinion, that's just reverse snobbery. They pretend they don't care about it while going out of their way to make sure they dress in a way that tells you. But that in itself is caring about it. We all have to clothe our bodies and we can't go around naked. And clothing is just one more form of communication with others, but also with ourselves. I'm often dressing up in quarantine just for the hell of it, just because I enjoy it. It makes me feel good. It lifts my spirits. I also want to give an acknowledgement to the Unraveled podcast, which is such a fantastic resource. And I can't say enough about Joy and the people she brings onto this podcast. Joy is a fashion historian, and I'm just looking up the historiography here so I get it right. She very quickly, the Unraveled podcast gave a resource link to things you could be reading in quarantine. But I have to say, if you are looking for relevant discussions about the fashion industry and fashion history, do follow the Unraveled podcast. Joy and everyone she brings on, I can't tell you how much I learn from this podcast. She also does her episodes with Jasmine Helm, and the content is fantastic. Next slide. And then we have a local author. I actually found Laura Lippman's posts through Twitter. Again, not, I think, as popular a way to find the quarantine fashion looks, but I just actually found her post really fascinating and full of great humor. Rachel Syme conceived of a Twitter hashtag distance, but make it fashion. And Laura Lippman hopped on this. If you don't follow Laura Lippman, they're just great. I did it, got dressed up, and it felt fantastic, like weirdly wonderful. There are really nice memories in my closet. I've really been enjoying them. And I think for me, it's also when I wear pieces that are vintage or thrifted, there are always memories associated with them. But I think in general, clothing holds some of the most powerful and personal memories, whether it's your wedding gown or it's the suit you wore to your first job interview. And that is built into the history of these garments. And when we wear them, that connection to our history is there. And that is a very powerful part of fashion to me. Do you associate memories with your clothing? And I think most people do. I think for me too, sometimes I wear certain pieces that I've acquired and I know the stories of them. For instance, I actually have a suit that I acquired from a seller that was worn by a woman who was a spy in Russia during the Kennedy administration. And I will tell you, when I have an interview or I have to give a lecture I'm nervous about, I wear that suit. All right, next slide. One of the first style challenges I did, which was pretty amazing, was started by Beth Jones, who's based in California. Her whole slogan is always play dress up, and that is also a hashtag. We don't need an excuse to play dress up, she says. It's not the answer to everything during this time, but it's one way that we can come together, bring joy into the day, motivate ourselves, and remind us that we will rise from the ashes, we will be better, we will learn from this, grow from this, and I hope become even more of who we are supposed to be. So let's do this together. Beth was really lovely in me putting together this talk and actually shared a quote with me. Here she's wearing her Always Play Dress Up t-shirt. Next slide. On a given day, at a given time, Beth Jones went live, and the entire Always Play Dress Up community was invited to dress up, whether they had the t-shirt or not, but unite in a single hashtag, which was Always Play Dress Up together. And there were hundreds, possibly now over 1,000 people who participated in this from all over the world, united in a single thing that transcended fashion. It was about togetherness during a period of dislocation. And I think that for me, that connectivity that has come through this community of vintage and thrift has brought me out of that sense of dislocation. And I think Always Play Dress Up, which continues today as an effort, has united so many people in conversations. Next slide. And this is the quote that Beth sent me. I've created Always Play Dress Up together to give us a chance to see each other wherever we were, give us a chance to see each other wherever we were, connect and not feel alone, celebrate each other, and feel the joy that getting dressed can bring. So again, this idea of community, of bringing people together, really central to her philosophy and her effort with Always Play Dress Up. Next slide. The other thing that has been really fun for me, fun for other people, is that certain people on Instagram have created these fantastic challenges. They put them out there. They're very egalitarian. Anyone can participate with them. They are associated with a hashtag, and it's the hashtag that links them. And Nora Baya, who is in Hong Kong, is the queen of these fashion challenges. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see two that she did. The one in particular I want to call out is the one where she's in the plaid jacket. There was a global challenge that so many people participated in. I missed out on it, but it was the McQueen challenge. And so some of these challenges are deeply rooted in costume history and celebrating costume history. I will say that since the Black Lives Matter movement has been foremost in many people's minds, you are seeing a real shift in how these challenges are being used. Nora Baya has been an absolute joy to correspond with. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show you what she sent me. Now, keep in mind, Hong Kong, while they came out of closure more quickly, they are dealing with incredible political unrest. And so her quote was very long, which she apologized. And so I'm just going to highlight a little bit of it. This is exactly what she wrote. A strange thing happened when we all had to stay home. We all looked outward to find a virtual community when our physical community closed down. I naturally looked to make connections and network with like-minded people, but I found that other people were eager to connect as well, which made it really fun and easy. She did, as I said, quarantine-style challenges. And then she wrote, these times are challenging. In addition to COVID-19 pandemic, we've been living with political unrest here in Hong Kong, much like the turmoil facing the United States now. When times are so turbulent, it's been good to have these quarantine connections to keep us going. Putting on a cute outfit can seem trivial at times like these, but the connections we've made through this shared passion for thrifted fashion have been a grounding presence. It has been incredible to be corresponding in any given day with people all over the world, and I've been able to do that via this initiative. Next slide. Another fascinating initiative that has come out of actually two scholars, one based in New York and one based in Budapest, who, when I wrote to them, were so eager to talk with me about their quarantine fashion initiative. And I know when you look at quarantine SS20, it might look a little odd, but what they decided to do, because they are fashion historians, was they decided that quarantine was the fashion of this spring season. So they've actually represented their Instagram as it would be represented if it was a season by a designer. And I think it is really brilliant. They hopped on a call from Budapest and New York with me, and we had an amazing talk. What they do is they have gathered, as you can see, Brooklyn, London, Italy, New York. They have gathered posts, well over 1,000 posts. Everyone has a statement. Everyone states a philosophy, and they have moved with the times. As the Black Lives Matter movement has, grown to be even more vocal, their posts have grown to be more vocal. Next slide. Here's a quote from them. Being quarantined during the COVID-19 pandemic has affected and even changed the way many of us dress. Being out of the office and out of the public eye has caused many of us to default to wearing our comfortable home clothes, like our sweatpants. Others do the opposite. And I'll just skip down. During unusual situations like this pandemic quarantine, many of us are using clothing as a tool to create safe spaces and super skins. Next slide. Here was a really powerful post from an artist in Brooklyn. She is a mender. She's part of the movement of visible mending, which is a really fascinating movement. And after the death of George Floyd, she created this sweater and her post. So it's interesting to see how these platforms begin to transcend the fashion in so many different ways. And they actually are dialogues about not only the national situation, but the global situation. Next slide. And then just to get back to my love letters to Baltimore Vintage, I wanted to say that, for me, I really had to step back and say, now that it's been going on 2 months, is that what I had to ask myself, what is at the center of it? And I would say it's really three things. It's connectivity, it's community, and it's celebration. And to me, I don't really feel that with quarantine coming to an end, to whatever extent it does, that this should come to an end. In fact, I think that it's a dialogue that has touched on so many more relevant issues beyond just the clothes themselves, that it's a dialogue that I very much want to continue. I think that this community has messages that are really powerful, that tell us about our time, that tell us about our challenges of this time, and also a community that really celebrates one another. I look to the Baltimore vintage community as one of the jewels in the crown of Baltimore, and I think that the more support that all of us can give them in whatever small way we can, the better. So that basically takes us right back to Baltimore, which is where I wanted to pause in the dialogue today. And my thank yous. I'm sure they grow by the day, but I'm so grateful to everyone who participated, to everyone who was so willing to give their time, to send me quotes, to guide me and to educate me. And I have real gratitude. I particularly am grateful to Margot and Martha, who invited me to do this talk, and to Cara, who is joining us. And I think now we're going to switch over to talk about a moment of incredible community and celebration, which happened at the opening of the Spectrum of Fashion, the fashion show. Cara very graciously sent us a variety of images, all by Jill Fanning, that were taken at the fashion show.
Yeah, this was a fantastic night. And, you know, for me, wanting to include more fashion in the print journals that we make has long been a priority. So it was amazing to have all of these designers, including, you know, shops and vintage stores and all sorts of different fashion curators in one place. And yeah, these images were so much fun.
Cara, this is your great quote. This was taken from your quarantine fashion article.
Yeah, Baltimore has amazing style, right?
100%. And Baltimore has a long history of being a center of fashion, you know, not only as a producer of fashion, but I think we saw in Spectrum of Fashion this incredible range of what fashion means in the Baltimore community. I think it was just, for me, a really transformational moment to see all of these people from different perspectives bring their things to and show off their work to people in one place.
Absolutely. I mean, Baltimore does not have a reputation for fashion, beauty, or style, and that's not actually based in reality at all. So, I mean, my expertise is in visual art, not so much fashion. This has sort of come later as being the editor of a magazine, but we started the What They're Wearing column because I wanted to go and sort of document the culture of Baltimore in really, really high quality and beautiful fashion inspired photos. So that's where Jill Fanning comes in. She's amazing. And what I realized also was I wanted to ask people the story of their clothing at these events. And it's not necessarily rich, you know, wealthy people events that I'm interested in. It's more creative events where really interesting clothing is being worn for a reason. And the stories were crazy and intimate and weird. And I feel like this kind of content is sort of a game changer for the perception of Baltimore culture as a whole. So whether we're at the Baltimore School of the Arts Gala or the Walters Gala or the Vintage Expo, it feels like a moment to sort of capture this like cultural movement and sophistication that's actually here and not being covered so much in news media.
I agree with you, and I think it's such a positive element of what's going on in Baltimore. And even in my lives, I've had people write to me and say, I would never have thought that Baltimore had this going on. You know, I think there were a lot of people that went to a Spectrum of fashion show, never thought that you could see, you know, over 40 different people participating, creating magnificent things, selling magnificent things in their vintage inventories, creating incredible jewelry. I just don't think, I think we need to, you know, that's what I personally feel. We just need to raise the awareness. I think Bmore Art's doing a phenomenal job raising awareness and putting Baltimore on that national map, which it really, you know, that's where it belongs. I will say that we talked a little bit about the Baltimore Vintage Expo, and which unfortunately in June was canceled due to COVID. But I think what is interesting to see that the Baltimore Vintage Expo that was started by Milk and Ice and Bottled Bread has grown now. It is a community gathering. And for me, who goes into New York, goes to some of these major vintage shows, I actually opted out to go to one of the major shows in favor of going to the expo, because frankly, I would say that the expo is as good, if not better. And I've found better things at the expo than I have in New York. You know, and what I loved seeing is there were plenty of people at the expo who don't necessarily wear vintage, but they were there for the music, for the experience, and for the coming together that the expo provides. So we're hopeful, you know, again, that in November we can have an expo again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a scene. And for me, being there covering that event, it was really interesting to see how many young people, like very young, were there. I mean, we're talking like teenagers, early 20 somethings, and you know, they want all the like high-waisted mom jeans. They're all wearing Doc Martens, which is what, you know, I was wearing in the 90s in college. Um, it's really interesting to see these trends, and okay, I had a little pause thing it.
Are you back with us, Cara?
I think so. Did I cut out? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
just a little, but that's okay. Actually, I have a couple questions for you, Cara, and then we'll start some other questions that we have from the audience. Since it seems like you have a little bit of a pulse on what's going on in the Baltimore community, have you seen any fashion store? Have you seen the fashion story shift since you first published the article? I think it was in April about what they're wearing. Have you seen any shifts? And also I'll also take, you've been told that you have like an art chic style to you. Has your style changed while you've been working from home during this time?
Yes. So I've definitely seen some shifts in terms of certain designers' careers taking off and elevating. So I think, I mean, Bishmi Cromartie is one that we covered. I think he was in like our third print issue. And we photographed a model wearing his clothes at the Walters. But it's been really interesting to see some of the local fashion designers sort of take off. From the Maryland Historical Society Spectrum show. Jody Davis was someone that I really discovered her through that exhibition. So we're featuring her in our next issue that's coming out. But for me, it's been the realization that there are really amazing professional designers based here, and that they're selling to other cities. They're selling to other, you know, stores and other places, but we can visit them and patronize them directly. So I would like to see more of that. And for me at home in quarantine, the choice was sweatpants or jeans. I would say I'm in the yoga pants category in the middle. But you know, I spent like 4 days in the hospital. So I was sick in the beginning. And so yeah, the hospital gown, that was a fun, you know, fashion experience for me. But yeah, I'm not getting too dressed up right now. If I can like exercise and get my work done in a comfortable way, that's about all I can handle these days. But I definitely miss my wardrobe a lot. It's waiting for me.
We see that on the chat, and actually we should have asked in our poll about yoga pants versus sweatpants or jeans even. So someone even commented if jeans were considered dressing up. So yeah, yes to yoga pants all the way, everyone's saying. Actually, where can we find, some people are asking, like Rosalind is asking where we can find the What You Are Wearing column.
Yeah.
That you have.
Yeah, so if you go to bmoreart.com, you know, what's the articles that are posted at the top are the most recent ones. But if you can either search what they're wearing, or if you scroll down, we have like a category section. You can search by category. So that's fashion and lifestyle. If you click on that, I think there's about 10 what they're wearing columns from all different events. And they're just, I agree with whoever's quote it was that said that fashion is not frivolous. I really think that there's fashion, like art, is an avenue to talk about much larger issues, to bring us together, to talk about history and politics and material culture. And why not do that through things that we love, you know, that are sort of central to our lives. So hopefully you can find them there.
I think we most of us agree, especially at the museum, we agree with that. Let's get to some questions. I'm going to start off asking a question. First, let's see. An anonymous person is asking how either of you afford and otherwise maintain, clean, and launder a wardrobe that is mostly vintage. And do you have any tips?
Well, I actually pay very little for most of my clothes. I have gotten a lot of free clothes over the years. I now am the person that my mother's friends know they can give their clothes to. I definitely am someone who, if I'm buying high-end designers, I'm buying them because I've found them randomly. So I think I actually, although I have a vast wardrobe, I think if I was buying new, I would be spending way, way more on my clothes. I do actually spend a lot of time very carefully maintaining my vintage, and I rely on a variety of things to clean them and spot treat them. I use the Laundress, which is a whole line of amazing, environmentally friendly products. Their stain soap is fantastic. I have a variety of vintage rinses, and I use diluted OxyClean, which is actually pH neutral, to do a lot of my cleaning. I also am maniacal about moth prevention, and I send to England it's a company called Total Wardrobe, who has a whole line of moth preventative products that actually I have found to be more effective than the products that the exterminator brought when I first moved to our house.
Wow. I was going to say, I learned a lot about this last week. We ran an interview with Maryland Historical Society curatorial assistant Emily Bach, and it's just titled Art and Emily Bach, and she talks about the clothing that they're accepting at the Maryland Historical Society and the fact that they put them in freezers to kill the bugs. I mean, the whole conversation is actually fascinating. I'm sort of in love with this interview still. But I mean, for me, I feel like my strategy is investing in vintage belts, jeans, and jackets. Those things are sort of always going to be sort of like in play, and maybe don't require as much washing, or maybe I'm just dirty.
No.
But those sort of like outer elements that sort of aren't as on the body. And I guess, can I ask a question to Alexandra? Like, do you ever, this is weird, do you ever buy like underwear or bras that are vintage? Does that exist? Is that a
Oh
thing?
yeah, it's very much a thing. So when I first started wearing vintage, I was very into early 60s and sort of late 50s clothes. And a very good friend of mine said, if you want to wear these clothes and look the right way, you got to wear the gear. And I was like, what's the gear?
Yeah.
The gear would be a girdle. So I have to tell you that back in that period when I still, if I'm wearing that period, I have a large collection of vintage girdles. And they are amazing. They make Spanx look literally like pajama pants. Like these things are, it's like a vice, but you're totally transformed. So I have a big collection of those. I have a couple pieces that are from the 50s that really need a bullet bra, so the pointy bra. So, there's certain pieces that if you don't have, as my mother tactfully calls them, the foundation garments, they will not look right.
Yeah.
And, now it's a huge trend. I actually just talked with Bottle of Bread about this Edwardian, like knickers and petticoats and all that underwear worn as outerwear is a highly collectible thing right now. So yeah, I mean, if it's vintage and I can wash it, I'm going to wear it. And I'm not creeped out at all about it.
That's a question that I've honestly always wondered. So thank you, Cara, for coming out and saying it. We have another really interesting question here from someone named Dee, and she's inquiring about international vintage. And, what does that, if you know the answer to this, what does that vintage community look like in other countries? Are there people in other countries who are people from other countries who are here in Baltimore who are highlighting vintage from their native countries? Can you guys talk to that a little bit?
I can talk a little bit about it. I think that there's vintage all over the world. I have truly not only, corresponded, but followed people literally all over the world. And thrift, when you sort of open up sort of the vintage thrift community, and speak about it largely, yes, it's absolutely all over the world. I don't know that it is as cohesive all over the world as it is in other places. I think in certain cities, the vintage world is maybe a bit more competitive. I think Baltimore is perhaps a uniquely collegial vintage community, but I'm sure that there are others. I also think it's interesting to see that I personally like to buy internationally because the inventory is entirely different. It's going to be entirely different designers. Locally, there are many of the sellers are sourcing things and have a particular interest in things from other countries. And, I think about the amazing wax resist Indonesian prints that are coming out of Indonesia, and dealers locally will have those. For instance, Milk and Ice, they love fine embroidered things from Eastern Europe. So there are definitely people sourcing things. Japanese vintage is highly collectible. I don't think you see as much of it in Baltimore, but there are people who really seek it out, and it's very, very expensive. So I think in a lot of ways it is global. It may not be as strong in every single community as I think we're seeing right now, particularly in Baltimore, but it exists.
I would like to also mention that I think Baltimore has done something really smart in the way that the vintage shops in the physical are in physical proximity, so that I can park my car, I can be in one neighborhood. When I was in high school, my friends and I used to come to Fells Point because you had Oh Susanna, you had Minas, you had Killer Trash. Trying to think who else. Karmic Connection, maybe that was more just like hippie clothes. But and now it seems like we either have Hamden, where there are these great shops like Keeper's Vintage or Hunting Ground. where it's a combination of new and also vintage, and it just feels very curated in a really purposeful way. And then we also have our Mount Vernon with Bottle of Bread and Keepers and some other places that have opened up. But this is one thing that the art community is missing, that the vintage community has really done, is just make it walkable and make it, you know, so that I can go to several different places at the same time, and then, you know, sample things that are vintage, but then also handmade and local from Baltimore as well. And these people just have amazing taste. So that's sort of what we're paying for and what we want to continue to support.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say that when Fells as a neighborhood, those shops started to close and you started to see this transition to Hamden, I think a few of the sellers who I've talked to, it's this attitude of stronger together. It's an attitude that is not competitive. You know, it's very antithetical to, oh, I don't want a store next to me that also sells clothes. It's, how can we partner? And I think that that's been, you know, the consistent message that I've gotten from everybody I've talked to, is kind of stronger together. And I just love Marissa at Bottle of Bread. You know, we were talking about Vintage Expo, and she's like, it's about bringing the vintage to the people. And everybody who's participating in this wants to work together to bring vintage to this larger world. And so that, I think, really should be celebrated. I don't know that that's the case in every city where it is highly competitive as a vintage seller.
We actually have a lot more questions, and a lot of them are practical questions, like where to get your clothes cleaned or your jewelry looked at. But unfortunately, I think we're going to have to ask them offline. And for those out there in the audience who did not get your questions answered, we will answer them. Cara and Alexandra will answer them offline, and we will send them out to you in a follow-up email thanking you for attending the program today. Thank you all for joining us today, Alexandra and Cara. If you like this virtual program on this topic, please register for July 16th, where we will be introducing Unlocking the Exhibition Between the Seams of Spectrum of Fashion, which will be very interesting. It will give you more behind the scenes of some of the garments that are in our exhibition, Spectrum of Fashion, and a lot of stories that come out of them.
We have a number of dynamic virtual programs coming up, so we urge you to check out our website, mdhs.org/events, for the full list of virtual programs. And I also wanted to let you all know that Bmore Art is in the middle of their first ever subscription drive. We'd really like to support this really wonderful magazine that brings so much to our Baltimore community, as evidenced by this conversation today. So please consider going to bmoreart.com and subscribing. They need your support to continue operating. And so thank you, Alexandra and Cara. We really appreciate you giving up your lunch hour today. And thanks to everybody in the audience. We'll send out the recorded program in a few days, and hope everybody stays well.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.